So people can get really hung up on chasing what they think is a good niche. That's not always really the way to do it, I would say. It starts with the relationship with your customer and becoming an expert in what they need.
Put that coffee down.
Creators are leaders. Be careful what kind of leaders you're producing here.
Helen, we're both in sales.
Let me tell you why I suck as a salesman.
They realized that to be in power, you didn't need guns or money or even numbers. You just needed the will to do what the other guy wouldn't.
I'm not leaving. The show goes on.
Well, hello there, friend. Welcome back to the Construction Leadership Podcast. I'm your host, Bradley Hartman. You know what? I'm just going to say it. I'm going to congratulate you right now. That's right. I'm starting off the podcast with a congratulation to whom? You, my friend. You've made a good choice to show up here today because you get to listen to my conversation with Miss Chelsea Zuccato. And if you were to look her up on LinkedIn, which I would recommend you do, you're going to notice she has a title that is going to just set you back for a second. You're going to do a little double take. Why? Because her title is Lumber Slinger. That's right. She's slinging lumber. And not only is that her title, at least here, and in this episode, you'll hear she has her hands and her talents in many different aspects of the business, from sales and marketing and buying and strategy. And she also leads a podcast that is closing in on 100 episodes specific to the lumber industry, also titled, that's right, Lumber Slingers. So Chelsea is the sales manager for the East for Patrick Lumber, and Patrick Lumber manufactures and trades wood products to diverse markets worldwide. In this episode, we talk about some of the niche markets that Patrick does really well in, and we talk about the pros and cons in the decision-making process because on one hand, we know that there are riches in niches. You hear people say that. And I believe that's true. I think we operate within a niche. However, sometimes you got to work your ass off to find that niche. And people say there's riches in niches after they've made a lot of money in there. The process of discerning where that is and pursuing it is something entirely different. I can tell you that myself in our business. We went down many rabbit holes that took us a year and a half to figure out this is not what we should be doing with our life. The market is telling us that they don't care. Therefore, if you pick the wrong niche, there ain't no riches there. Chelsea has been at Patrick Lumber for 17 years. She was working there while she was going to school at Washington State University. Mascot is, that's right, the Cougars. And Chelsea is a really inspiring story. She started as an administrative assistant, working at the desk, picking up the phones. And in this episode, she talks about a leadership moment, a few small sentences that the president of her organization said to her when she couldn't even imagine a future in lumber, let alone really increasing her trajectory. And it changed her life. And I think it's really important to consider the impact that you can make on, I would say, all talent, but especially young talent that is, quite frankly, sampling. They're trying to figure out what they're good at. What do they like? And one small conversation can quite literally change everything, as it did for Chelsea. Chelsea spent 7 years working as a lumber trader. Meanwhile, she also picked up the responsibilities as a marketing manager. And as I said, she leads their sales efforts in the eastern part of the United States now. In this episode, we talk about navigating the transition from manager to leader. We talk about time management and how to balance everything that's happening inside the organization. And as you'll hear from Chelsea, she is involved in other organizations and is on the board of nonprofits to really promote things that she's passionate about in the business. And for any of you that either run your own podcast or aspire to start a podcast or have thought about starting your own podcast, you're going to hear some very useful insights and perspectives on Chelsea and her colleague and co-host Natalie as they are closing in on 100 episodes on Lumber Slingers podcast. All right, that's it. Let's jump into it. You, my friend, you're in for a treat. Please enjoy my conversation with Miss Chelsea Zuccato, sales manager at Patrick Lumber and chief lumber slinger. As always, thank you for listening. Miss Chelsea Zuccato, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me, Bradley.
I feel a little more intimidated because you are a fellow podcaster. You know the craft. You ask good questions. You know all that goes into this. You know, you're not just a neophyte, so I feel a little more pressure here.
Yeah, no, well, you shouldn't. You have a great podcast, and I'm still learning every day, so.
Aren't we all? Let's just jump in right here. Favorite leadership movie of all time, Chelsea, and prepare to defend it.
Okay. Well, so this one for me is an interesting question because I think a lot of movies, whether you think they are or not, teach you about leadership. And
Agreed.
More recently, I watched apparently I live under a rock. I don't watch a lot of movies, but I live under a rock because I came across this movie called Aquila and the Bee. Have you heard of it?
Young lady spelling bee, correct?
Yes.
I have not seen it. I know of what you speak.
Yeah, so I was interested. It caught my eye. I don't know if I saw a preview or something. And so I was like, let's watch this movie tonight. So anyway, it's actually a very good movie. It teaches a lot of leadership lessons within the movie. So basically the premise is that she's an 11-year-old girl attending school. She's impoverished and living, I would say she lives with her mom, doesn't have a dad.
Okay.
And she has poor role models growing up, basically. And she has peer pressure, at school and all these things mounting up kind of just to live her life a certain direction. And she's very smart. And her teacher notices that she's a very good speller. She's getting very good grades and asks her to compete or to go into a spelling bee or suggests that she should go into a spelling bee. And she's like, I'm not going to do that. She's embarrassed because her friends find out, that she's a good student. And so she kind of gets bullied for being smart. So she falls to peer pressure and she ignores what her teacher says. But long story short, she had somebody that believed in her despite having poor role models. And she ended up getting involved, going to the spelling bee. And she had that encouragement, a little bit of encouragement that she needed. And then she believed in herself. And the movie kind of goes through, she fails a lot. It's not like she just goes and starts winning all these spelling bees, but she learns a lot of lessons. And there's a really important quote in the movie that her mom says to her that she has 50,000 coaches waiting to help her. And it's, all the people she's surrounded by. And I think that, in life and in leadership, it's true. And I think a good leader has 50,000 coaches. It's the people we're surrounded with, the people we work with, our peers, our own leaders, and people that maybe even work under us are our coaches that we can learn from. So that, the takeaway from that movie was just, even though it's an 11-year-old girl in a spelling bee, there's a lot of leadership lessons that came out of it that resonated with me.
Well, there's a couple things that jump out. The easier one is as I started doing keynotes, part of it made sense. And I'm like, tell a story, add some jokes in here, add some little business stuff, and it works. And I think early on they did. But then I realized there's a craft to this and watching other people. And I got some training from a guy and he said he had an idea called the 10,000 mentors. And he says, anytime you see someone speak, whether that's publicly as another keynote or somebody on CNN or whatever it might be, he's like, you can learn from that person of what to do, what not to do. And he's like, but you got to go in there thinking, studying their mind. The other thing that you said to me, and maybe if there's a way for young leaders to do this, the things that I think have changed my life and have changed other people's lives is when there is someone else who says, Chelsea, Bradley, I see something in you that maybe you don't see, or maybe you're almost too afraid to admit is there. In your career, as you are moving from manager into full-fledged leader full-time, how might you do that in a way that's authentic? Because sometimes it's easier when I've been here 40 years, Bradley, I see something in you. And you're like, oh, that's great. It's a little bit harder. I'm like, I don't know. You and I, you're young, you're smart. Any advice on how to do that? Because I think when leaders can do that, it changes lives. It changes careers.
Yeah, I think it's really simple. I think it happened to me. being at my lumber company, starting as a receptionist, the president of the company at the time, his name is Jim Rodway, I became a trader assistant and I was working at my desk and he came by me and he wanted me to take this assessment that they wanted to start using before they hired salespeople. And so he's like, I think you'd be a really good salesperson. So can you take this and be our guinea pig? And I said, sure, that, no problem. And there weren't any female sales traders at the time on the trading floor at Patrick. And I think there maybe has been, there was one other one in the history of the company. So right away, not seeing anybody that was like me doing that job, I already didn't believe that it was even an option for me. And so him just saying that, he thinks I'd be a good salesperson. And then I took the test and he's like, you should be out there on the trading floor. That little side comment even, it wasn't like some inspirational talk. He didn't pull me into his office. He didn't even say like, hey, do you want to be a trader? He's like planted that seed. And so I think if you have an opportunity to plant a seed in that way, or if you have an opportunity to have candid feedback with those that are direct reporting to you and they show interest in something, you should really lean into that because they're telling you what they want. And if you can lean into that and give that back to them, then it's a win-win situation for everybody because then it's playing into their strengths and their passions. And so I don't think it's a big deal. It could be as much as planting a seed, saying something when you see it, when you see something good in somebody, pointing it out and acknowledging it. Where could that person go, just from those kind of comments?
What I love about that story is there's no downside there. And obviously I don't know the context or the intention of the individual who shared that with you. But even if you said, oh, I would never do that. And that was the end of the story. It's a compliment, right? It's someone saying, hey, I think you could really do that. Now, yeah, I know lots of leaders say, hey, I've kind of dropped little hints like that. And sometimes there is someone on the other end who's open, who's willing to think differently, like yourself, who grabs onto that and says, this could open up something entirely new and different for me. That's exciting. There's probably just as many other folks that look at him and are like, all right, go back to clacking away. And they're like, well, that's a nice thing for him to say, but I'm not going to do anything with that. But there's no downside, right? It's either a compliment or, in this case, whatever, in a large or small way, it changed your life, the trajectory of your career, which that is leadership, right?
Totally. It planted the seed that eventually, maybe I didn't believe it at the time, but something I didn't even see for myself. Somebody saw it from the outside who I respected and was obviously the leader of our company. To say that to me was very impactful. I mean, that's what started the belief pattern that it was an option.
That belief pattern. I like that phrase. Can you give me a little bit of context? I have never been involved in one nor seen one. I can conjecture what it might look like. Give me an idea of what it's like to work on a trading floor in our industry.
Yeah. So my company, Patrick Lumber, is a little different. We used to have a trading floor. We don't have much of one now. We have a smaller office in Portland and then a headquarters down in Philomath, Oregon. And so a lot of us are very hybrid and on the road. Okay. But the trading floor was an open concept. Everybody's at their desk on the phone. It gets loud. I've heard of wholesale trading groups that the trading floor kind of feels like the stock market.
Yes, that's kind of what's in my mind, except we're talking about Southern Yellow Pine versus some stock.
Yes, yeah. And so my company's always focused in, we're more specialties rather than commodity. So it's not like, I just bought 100 cars, I'm selling 100 cars, buy high, buy low, sell high. Right. It's not like that at my company. I've heard that it is like that at wholesalers, trading floors. So, and I think the name trader is kind of funny because at my company, we do a lot of value added manufacturing. And so we're not necessarily buying and selling and never seeing the product. A lot of times we're touching it. So I don't even know if trader's accurate, but historically and still to this day, it's how we refer to ourselves at Patrick Lumber Company.
Maybe tell me a little bit about, given your focus on specialty products and value-added services, on cutting it different ways, letting it dry. I don't want to say way too much. It's all good research, and I want to come prepared, Chelsea, because I'm a professional. That being said, the drone videos and the videos you guys have, lots of photographs. You guys do a good job of storytelling in your website. So I would tell anyone who maybe in the back of their mind It's like, I don't think we do a really good job of sharing our story or telling a story or showing our history going back to 1915. Go to Patrick, just Google Patrick Lumber. They're going to give you a great example of that. But as you think about targeting niches, I think a lot of folks who are listening are trying to do similar thing. There are challenges that come with that where you're targeting a niche. The risk is, well, what you thought was a niche, it's either non-existent or it's too small and not there. How do you think about that, given the specialty products you provide? How do you kind of suss out what would be the niche markets to pursue versus maybe it's not the right time, or you maybe we'll do that in 2025?
Yeah. Well, it's a great question because I think a lot of new salespeople that we hire, they see the veterans of the company have their niches and they're like, I'm going to get mine. And then it's this whole thing of throwing everything at the wall to see what sticks, chasing the shiny object, being the dog on the street that chases the next car that, you chase one car, but here comes another one. So I'm going to go get this one. So people can get really hung up on chasing what they think is a good niche. And that's not always really the way to do it, I would say. You really have to find something. It's more, for me, in my experience in managing traders, it starts with the relationship with your customer and becoming an expert in what they need. You could come up with a product and think it's going to work great. And then you put 2 years of time, effort, process, research, marketing, and then it falls flat on its face. That's one way. We all learn lessons that way. We kind of have to. Or, listening to your customer. If you have a solid customer base and you have that relationship and becoming an expert for them and finding solutions for them, you're going to find a niche in that. And so I would say it's hard because you might look at something and think, ooh, this could be good. I'm going to chase it. And it turns into nothing. And I would just say the most important piece of whatever you decide to follow, stay focused. And do not go to the next thing until you focus on this and decide if it's a failure or if it's a long-term going to be really successful, and minimize those distractions. Because if you try to be everything to everybody, you're never going to find a niche. You're just going to be, what is it? Jack of all trades, master of none, or, right. I've seen that happen. And it happened to me even when I got into sales. I wanted to answer every single quote. I don't even think I understood my customer base. I just wanted sales. And so I chased everything. And it wasn't until I decided I honed in on one part of the market. And then I was like, I'm going to be an expert in this. Everybody's going to call me the timber girl. I wanted to sell Doug for Timbers. I wanted that to be my middle name. I wanted people to know me for that. And so when I kind of went down that road, which by the way, I still buy and sell mostly Doug for Timbers. That is what I do. Yeah. So it worked to a certain extent, but the market I was going after didn't necessarily work for how my company, what we do and how I can add the best value. So you got to learn lessons and know your place in the market, know your place in the supply chain. You might not know all that at first when you're just learning, but if you focus and you learn, then you'll know, okay, I'm going down this path. This is the right path. You should be open to change and be okay with putting your pride to the side and saying, okay, I thought this was the direction. I'm changing directions because this isn't serving me. It's not serving the company.
From a leadership standpoint, how might you, whether an example in the past where you've coached somebody, but at a certain point, quitting is the most logical thing to do, to stop investing resources and time and attention, because there's always inevitable trade-offs that we make. Sometimes I've seen sales managers, sales leaders really struggle communicating and setting a plan with someone that says, I know all the work that you've put in. I know you're passionate about this. It is okay. This idea that quitters never win, there's an element of idiocy with that, because if you are pursuing a bad option or opportunity, there might be nothing there, and that's life. So part of this is being able to pull back. How might you advise people that are listening that might be leading other people that quitting is going to be your option? And sometimes quitting is winning, because if we're just doing the same thing over and over again, we are always making trade-offs. So any examples that come to mind or any advice you might have for our listeners?
Well, the great thing about my company is that, and this is not true in every company. I know that I have a lot of friends in the industry and they're like, my company doesn't do this. My company really encourages creativity creating those niches, creating the market, and allowing the budget to do that. Improving, if you put it on paper, most likely you're going to get support of the board and support of your management to help you see it through. And so we've done this plenty of times. We annually meet with our traders, and we even meet them halfway through the year if necessary. But it's very transparent in their plan, what they're doing, and if there's like a budget, inventory budget associated with that. So if you have a plan that you've thought out and you've done the research and you have what you're going to try, we're most likely going to give you a year to 2 years to see if it works and give you the support and resources that you need. The proof is in the pudding. So if there ends up being a big write-off associated and the market changes and maybe the cost of your inventory is high and there's not a market for it and this has just been a loss, that's when we have that conversation, especially at those end of year planning meetings around October, November, where we talk about the next year and the traders put a lot of thought into their plans. And so that's at that time that we would have the conversation of, obviously this isn't working. Here's how we can help you. The thing about my company also is you have a lot of ownership. You have a lot of stake in what you're doing. And so it's not that the company's going to take the hit on that. It's you're owning part of that. It's going to be coming from your bottom line as well. And so there's this equal ownership, but also, you take the responsibility and you're not spending house money, I guess is what I'm trying to say. You're like, okay, this is also my mortgage payment. So,
Yes.
So I think if there's that level of ownership, the decision is both, it's not only the company's, it's yours as well. We really empower our traders at our company. It's like they're running their own business. And so is it in their best interest? And we support them if they want to try something and take a risk. And a lot of traders learn the hard way. I did myself. I started a program that I thought was going to be making big money, and I took a really big write-off. It took me a year to get through it. I had a lot of sleepless nights, and we just call that paying your tuition. You pay your tuition, you learn your lesson. Risks have rewards, but they also got a downside. So yeah, I think to put this away that I've heard another leader at my company put it is we give our sales team enough leash to hang themselves. So the ownership is on both sides, and we really trust. And I think that trust empowers who we're working with, that they have just as much ownership as we do. Mm-hmm. So they want to do the research. They want to, but it doesn't always work out. That's just the bottom line. And you got to know when to cut your losses. And most of us have had to do that with a lot of products. So.
Well, recently I was having the conversation, and the executive was expressing some confusion and just could not wrap his head around why this was more on the sales side, but we're acting a certain way. And I just asked the question, I said, it doesn't seem like they have a whole lot of skin in the game, do they? Mm-hmm. And he's like, no. And it was all one-sided. The upside was all, now if it worked out for the salesperson, it worked out for the company. If it didn't, there was no downside. Right. I'm like, if there's no skin in the game, then the game you're playing is suboptimal. You're going to get suboptimal results. Someone's going to end up unhappy. And then in a long enough timeline, it's not going to be a win for everybody. Do you have an example that comes to mind? I'm trying to think, and knowing, again, spending some time on your website and just seeing the products and some of the ingenuity there. For our audience, do you have any, quick story of just this idea of applying creativity, applying budget? By the way, when you just said, giving you 1 to 2 years to see how it works. I love that, because sometimes we're like, hey, we can experiment with this. Consider this a pilot, Chelsea. We'll give you 90 days. You're like, sometimes you take 90 days this time of year to get a call back. Yeah. But giving them that time, making sure there's skin in the game. Any recent victories that you'd be willing to share that you say, this is exactly what I'm talking about, whether it's you or somebody else?
Yeah, I think that, and I can see this as an industry trend anyway, which is thermally modified wood. Yeah. Now, I think this goes hand in hand with a failure and a big investment that we made that maybe didn't work out so well, or we learned a lot of lessons from it. But we did have a product that we thermally modified like 6 years ago that we thought this is going to be the next thing. And we did all the testing at the university. We had the specs on it. We had all the architecture information that we needed. We had it trademarked. And then there was something that you wouldn't expect, which is There's a oversupply at the time of this species.
No kidding.
And then we hit 2020 and everything goes gangbusters, supply and demand and all that. So we stopped doing that product because we couldn't put wood to the side for that program anymore. It just didn't make sense. We had wood that was ready to go in the pile that needed to go for our core customers. So I think through that, we learned a lesson, right? But now thermally modified wood is making a comeback all over the place. People have brands, they have, all these different types of species. And so I would say a lot of that grunt work that maybe we saw, well, this didn't work out 4 years ago now. Well, now we did a lot of that legwork already. And there's other species you can thermally modify. And that is something that we're exploring and something that I'm seeing on our sales that is, one of the top products so far for the first half of the year. So that's like a good example of maybe something we put a lot of money and research into, didn't look like it was really going to get its return. And then now look at what's happening and the market's accepting it and, requesting it. And so that's something cool that more recently I think I've noticed.
Well, I love that example. What I wrote down as you were talking is the phrase, being early is the same as being wrong. And part of what I've experienced in ways kind of small and large in my own business and with some of our clients is there's a rejoinder to that, which is sometimes if you're playing the long game, you were early, you were wrong, and you took the hit on that. Yet sometimes the world comes around to where you were, and you've already, to your point, you've already put in some of the hustle and the attention and the sweat and the energy and the capital investment. And now it's not just sitting there ready to go most of the time, but you are much further than other people. And all of a sudden people say, I remember you, Chelsea, you were talking about that in 2019.
Right.
And now all of a sudden you're like,
the switch back on.
Correct. Right. So I like that. I'm going to turn a little bit here. We're going to take a hard right turn as I often do here. I'm going to say 4 words to you.
Okay.
2 sentences. 2 bullet points. And I want you to give me a little context what they mean. Pay attention, show up. What do those words mean within Patrick Lumber?
Yeah. So pay attention. Those are 2 of our 4 core values of our company. Paying attention means that you're paying attention to your customer, your supplier, internally with your team, and you're paying attention to the market. You really got to pay attention. I know we're just selling lumber, we're not saving lives, but there's a lot of variables that go into being successful every day. And so paying attention is a big part of success at our company. Whether that's success in sales or success in your role, if it is not sales, you've got to be paying attention because internally things move fast. People are changing, the company's growing. So paying attention is a very important part of our business.
How does that tie in directly to show up? What does it mean to show up?
Yeah, so most likely if you're not showing up, you're not paying attention.
Okay. I assume those would be related, but
yeah. Well, I mean, you got to show up. You show up to your customers, you show up to work, you are available, you're responsive, you're answering emails, you're answering your phone. It's a very obvious, even though we're living in a hybrid remote world at Patrick Lumber a lot of the time, it is very obvious if you're not showing up. You can just tell. You can tell when people aren't at their computer all day or if they're not picking up their phone. And we're in sales, so you need to show up. You need to show up for your customer, even if you don't have, the right answer or an answer at the moment. Showing up for them is the best thing you could do to guarantee that loyalty is going to be there. That builds trust. Paying attention and showing up all feed into building trust, right? So those are 2 very important core principles at our company. You got to show up to win. Yeah, and
that's what I was excited to ask you about because I see obviously you got a sales leadership element under your purview. You're also involved in marketing. By the way, make sure we're going to finish. I'm going to put a little thumbtack in this. You guys have one of the, I would say, top 5 most iconic and I would say coolest logos in our industry. I love it. It's clean. It's simple. We'll come back to that later.
Okay.
You're also involved in the North American Forest Foundation. You, Chelsea, in addition to having random people like myself call up and ask for your time to join my podcast, You've got a lot of stuff going on. You also got your own podcast. You're going on 80 episodes of the Lumber Slingers. When it comes to time allocation, how are you making sure you're able to show up in all the places you need to be without getting spread out too thin?
Yeah. Well, I think that's an important lesson that I'm always learning. I have learned to really say yes to the things that matter to me and no to the things maybe I'm interested in, but just aren't as important. So I've taken a step back on a lot of my volunteer roles over the last year and a half, I would say, and then learning how to delegate. So I've managed the marketing for our company for probably over 10 years now. I've lost count, but I've had help along the way when we have reception come in and they're able to help, with some of those tasks. But this year, what we've done differently is that I formed a marketing committee back in January that I basically just asked my company for volunteers of who wants to be involved in marketing, because a lot of people have opinions about marketing, but don't necessarily want to, execute. But we have 9 people in the company that wanted to be part of it. And then we formed subcommittees. So each of them kind of there's two to 3 people per subcommittee that have a focus, whether it's PR and advertising, swag, website, social media.
Yeah.
And so we kind of broke it out. And so I would say, to answer that question, really learning how to delegate and empower people, because a team of people doing marketing and everything else that needs to get done is way better than just me trying to do it and doing it, sloppy. So the team has been amazing. I'm so impressed with the committee, and we're, 7 months into the year, but people have really taken ownership and they do a good job. They do better than I've done. So it's this is, it's really cool to watch. People get really excited. They're bought in, they're engaged, they want to be part of it, and so learning to delegate and also learning to say no has been really important when it comes to time management. So I can focus on what's important during the day, because I do wear a couple different hats at the company. So that's helped out a lot.
Well, we know that all of us as individuals, we have something that we're really good at and we love to do, and we like to spend a lot of our time there. At the same time, we like variety. We like something that's different, that gives us a break, that allows our brains to switch over. So I like that idea. And I'm not surprised that you got some talented people that maybe in another organization, they would have never been asked to be involved in marketing. But now they are, and now they can just take a little, maybe 5 or 10% of their time speculating and put it here. And they're coming with a whole bunch of energy when maybe your energy would be low. So I love that idea. And I think
and we don't have a marketing department. So it's it's either the people that care about it do it, or we just don't do it. And so it's always been an important part of our business, whether you like it or not, an important part of any business. I'm a marketing degree, so I'm a little biased, but marketing is important, and be intentional about it. And so if you're not intentional, you should see some of the things that happen, like the way that the logo gets skewed, or the way that somebody makes a hat or a t-shirt and you're like, oh my God, please.
Yes.
Throw that away. So you got to pull in the reins somehow. And so that's kind of been the balancing act that we've found out over time. And then having this committee and more people involved will really propel, our brand into the next century. We've been around for 100 years. We've got 100 more years at least to go. And we got to reinvent the way we've been doing it so we stay relevant.
Yeah. Maybe tell me a little bit about why did the North American Forest Foundation, what is its mission? Why is it important? And why has that passed through the filter in terms of things that are really important for you to invest your time in?
Yeah. So the North American Forest Foundation, their mission is to support the forest products industry through education, advocacy, and science-based facts about sustainable forestry. And really that's revealing the truth about trees. And, it's a diverse and renewable resource that we all have. And I've always seen the North American Forest Foundation when I attend trade shows, they have a booth, and I've, oh, that's cool, or I'll get a t-shirt or whatever. But the executive director, Allison DeFord, approached me she really wanted me on the board. And I don't know, she asked me for one or 2 years. And I was really good. I said no, like we were just talking about. I said, no, I'm sorry. When I give time to something, I want to give it, proper attention. And I just don't have time right now. And so finally, she was asking me, and I kind of had recently seen the impact of the organization. When I actually had Allison on my podcast to bring some more awareness to the foundation. After that podcast, I was like, all right, sign me up. This is a really good organization, and it's not too terrible of a commitment, and it's for something I'm really passionate about. And so basically, most of what the foundation does is educate elementary and teenage. They try to educate at a younger age about the forest products industry and how sustainable of a resource trees are. And so one of the biggest programs they have right now is called the Truth About Trees kit.
Okay.
And that's a kit it's a curriculum that's distributed. It's free. So the foundation raises money, prints these kits, and distributes them free to any school that requests, basically through the website. And we've distributed 300 of these kits this year so far. Basically, I have a kit that I've kind of like gone through and looked at myself, and it brings awareness to the forest products industry, brings awareness to things that we use every day that are made from trees. And then it also starts piquing interest about having a career in lumber. So it's a really, really cool foundation. We're working on developing an app right now that would like gamify what I'm talking about.
Okay.
So basically what I mean by that is teenagers, young adults would get more interested. This app would also be something that kids and teachers could use in schools. And so I would say the best thing to do to get the most information would be to visit the website, the NorthAmericanForestFoundation.org. That's where you can request a kit.
Okay.
You can see what events we're involved in. They go to a lot of lumber industry events and association events. It's how we engage with the lumber community. And we also have School Counselors of America trade shows. The board is made up of lumber industry executives, and those are always rotating every couple of years. And so, if you want to get more involved or maybe make a donation, right now we're really trying to push fundraising for this app that we want to implement into high schools. And part of that, it's a big cost to develop an app. And so we're trying to fundraise money for that. We need some bigger donors. And so you can make a donation online and learn more information about the foundation at NorthAmericanForestFoundation.org.
Okay. Well, I've been trying to inspire people in my life around this idea. I was reading this book. I'm not going to go into the reasons why, but it's a book on like everyday physics. Somehow I went through grade school, high school, and college, never took a course on physics. This book started talking about just the physics in everyday life. And they started talking about capillary action in 300-foot like sequoia trees, which I grew up in the industry. I'm generally aware of how trees work, like whatever. I reread the chapter like 3 times and I started telling my kids about it. And they're like, yeah, don't care. The Xbox is on. I got to do something else. My wife's like, enough lumber. Oh, this is our life. I don't need more of it. But I was just totally inspired. So I'm very interested in like what is in here. But I just think there are certain avenues to let people know what we do, how we do it, how it's fun. And not only what you're talking about on land management, forestry, all that, but then we get to convert that into how we build our planet and grow it. I'm like,
yes.
How we continue to say, well, it's an unsexy industry. I'm like,
right.
What are you talking about? You want to sit behind a desk and just stare at numbers all day? Like, we're doing some amazing things. So, and I know you guys talk a lot about this and bring a lot of energy on the Lumber Slinger podcast. I'm interested, what maybe non-obvious or unexpected insights or value have you gotten as a host with Natalie on doing that? As you kind of, whatever, here in a few months, you're going to be, you're going to be pushing 100 episodes, which is a huge deal, which puts you like literally in like the top 2% of all podcasts that have ever gotten that far. Most fall off well before 50. So,
yeah, that's amazing. Well, we've learned that being consistent is really important. And when we're kind of to tie it back to your question about niches, is that we've really found a niche in our podcast with kind of who's listening and what people want to hear and what they get the most use out of. And so basically the lessons that we've learned from having a podcast is that just being consistent and doing it and not waiting until it's perfect. I think my co-host Natalie and I have really gotten into, thinking like, okay, well, we don't have the right equipment, or we don't have a lot of money. This is actually something that we do on the side. It's more of a hobby. Our company doesn't pay for it. We put a big disclaimer on our show. This is not the opinion of our company. It's us. So don't blame Patrick Lumber if there's something you don't like that you've heard. But it's really been a labor of love. And we've learned a lot of insight from industry leaders just by having them on. But people reach out to us. They want to come on the show. They want to talk about the lumber industry. And I guess what we were hoping when we created it was that her and I learn a lot through podcasts. And at the time we were listening to a certain podcast that we loved, and then that podcast went off the air, and it was more of a professional development and learning. And we were like, gosh, I just wish there was something in lumber. And at the time there were like no lumber podcasts. I mean, we were looking it up, and it was like, there's nothing. There's one guy that I think it was like Shannon's something. He had a lumber podcast. That's the only one we could find. So we were like, we're just going to have to make one. We have to make one that we want to listen to, basically.
Right.
And so that's kind of where the idea formed. And that's where it's kind of taken off from. Now, we started in 2019, but we stopped for a long time. We came back to it. I had a really good friend. His name's Gavi Gasol. He works for Western Forest Products at the time. He goes, something weird? I was looking up podcasts for lumber, and I found this one called Lumber Slingers. It's so weird. And you only had one episode. What's up with that? And I go, oh, you caught us. We recorded one episode and that's it. So he really inspired us. So we had him on as our first guest. We had him come onto our show, and that really kickstarted us to go again. And the whole premise is that we're asking the questions that we want to learn about, something that we wish we had when we just got into the lumber industry. So you'll find that our episodes, we have a different variety of, whether it's learning how to convert board footage, or learning the terms of the trade, or recently we did a forestry series on, just learning more on the forestry side, a perspective we don't even have. And so it's been really fun.
Yeah, well, I've just been impressed. Well, number one, getting beyond that one episode. I did see that because I was looking, like, how long have they been doing this? I'm like, 2019. Then I'm like,
yeah,
actually not. It looks like really there was a false start, but then you're going. But I know this. I know this firsthand. The number of people that come and say, I think starting a podcast would be fun. All my friends are telling me I should do it. Yeah. I'm like, yes, I think you'd be great at it. Here's the thing though. You gotta show up. And it's hard and it takes time. And normally the first few episodes are fun, but after a while, unless you get a process for this and you love doing it, you're good at it, which I can tell you guys laugh, you're having fun, you're sharing insights. That's what other people want to hear. That's why I enjoy it. And to your point, kind of tying this back to that idea of where we started here with Aquila and the Bee and the 10,000 or 50,000 mentors is, I would say, probably the biggest part of my growth over the last 15 years has been from hearing about someone I've never heard of talking a podcast. And then he either wrote a book or she was in a book. And then I just kind of go in this rabbit hole, but it's never been easier to really, if you read a couple books or you listen to 3 or 4 hours of someone speaking on their expertise, you are not therefore an expert. However, you're probably more knowledgeable than 98% of the people that are out there. And I just feel like we're living in kind of a special time. And I think what you and Natalie are doing and Trent joining in and sharing insights and making it fun and making it short, putting in that time is a huge value. So how would you recommend people find more about Lumber Slingers, subscribe to it, all that stuff?
Yeah. So we distribute on Spotify and Apple. So if we have a website, lumberslingers.com. If you go to that, it's just going to link you up to the website. We're nothing fancy. We both have full-time jobs. She's the CFO of our company. So again, we are nothing fancy. We're no frills, but we're learning, every episode how to be better. So, and then you can always email us at lumberslingers@gmail.com. We love to hear feedback, or if you have an idea for an episode. We've definitely gotten ideas from listeners who have suggested themes and topics. And so we love to hear that kind of stuff. And usually somebody knows somebody and we can get them on and interview them or learn about it and do a podcast on it.
Yeah. Well, hey, I know you're busy. I also know you're very pregnant. You have been a trooper. I appreciate you making time. And I just want to say thank you. What you guys are doing, my assumption was, apparently your disclaimer isn't direct enough for a dumb guy like me to pick up on. I just assumed it was like part of Patrick Lumber because I think you guys are bringing them a ton of value. So if you want to leverage that into something internally, you can. But I think it says even more about you guys and the dedication to it when this is something extra. It's above and beyond. And for you guys to put your time and attention and passion into it, I think even means more to me as a listener. So thank you. And I appreciate you making time.
Thank you. I appreciate you having me on as a guest. And we care about the next generation of employees coming into the industry and the generation that's currently here and the generation we need to learn from. And so that's really why we do it, is we're passionate about that and bringing value, that we want from a podcast, hopefully to those who are listening, even if it's just 11 people. We love doing it. We have a lot of fun. So,
yeah. Well, I think this is a great place to end this podcast episode. Chelsea Zuccato, Patrick Lumber, thank you.
Thank you so much, Bradley.
All right, then, friends, how did that go? Hopefully you enjoyed my conversation with Chelsea Zuccato, and she was very generous with her time and her insights. And when we were speaking, she was very, very pregnant. We had to take a pause or two as this small human in her belly was moving around, blocking her ability to breathe. So I really appreciated her battling through that, adjusting as she needed to make this happen. And it was really worth it. I really enjoyed talking to her. And she is someone that you're going to want to follow as an insightful leader in our business who really understands the trends and the market conditionings that are unfolding now, but also someone who is living a pathway to get more talented women engaged and having a full career in our business. If you did enjoy my conversation with Chelsea Zuccato, please rate and review this episode on whatever podcast player you are listening to. That means more to us than you know, as we strive to grow our construction audience to bring us all closer together so we can build more enjoyably, safer, with more profits. That is our goal. All right, that's all I got. We're going to close out with our leadership mantra. You, my friend, are owed nothing. Deliver value first. Make it a great week.